Do you ever feel like life is just happening to you? Like your external circumstances or your emotions are driving the car and you're just along for the ride? I've been on both ends of this spectrum. When I was younger, I thought that being emotionally in tune meant following every emotion on a whim and letting my emotions guide every action. And then as I got a little bit older, I learned that that wasn't sustainable to follow my emotions everywhere without feeling like I had any control over them. And I kind of did the opposite. So I lived in denial in a way. I could only handle positivity, so I wasn't having difficult conversations that needed to be had. And in a way, I skipped reality altogether. The key is really finding balance. So this video is about finding that inner anchor so that we can still acknowledge hard emotions while staying grounded. If you're new here, my name is Brielle and welcome. I'm so honored to have you here. I am a licensed therapist and I created this channel as a way of building a community where we can come together and demystify any topics of healing and hopefully get to know ourselves a little bit better along the way. First, we're going to talk about what it means to live with an external versus internal locus of control. Now, if you're somebody who has an external locus of control, you really feel that life is happening to me. You don't feel like you have much control over what happens in your life or even your reactions. It really feels like everything is out of your control. And if you're somebody who lives with an internal locus of control, your mentality is more that of, I don't control everything that happens, but I can control how I respond. And research shows that if you work to have an internal locus of control, you have higher resilience, problem-solving capabilities, and overall live a happier and healthier life. Like I mentioned earlier, when I was younger, I very much had an external locus of control. I let my emotions drive most of my decisions, and I really felt like my emotions controlled my life and not the other way around. I let my emotions steer my self-worth, my relationships, and all of my decisions. Now, I do want to mention that for being the age that I was at, junior high, high school aged, that is developmentally appropriate. So you're not necessarily supposed to automatically know how to have that internal locus of control at that age. You're still kind of figuring it out. So this is not a judgment on myself because that is developmentally where I was at, where I was supposed to be at. But then as I got a little bit older, a little bit further into my development, I kind of flip-flopped and did a 180. I overcorrected into denial. I didn't want my emotions to run the show, so I didn't necessarily acknowledge them. I kind of pretended like nothing bad was ever happening. It was really hard for me to talk about difficult things, about things that were going on in the world, in my family, with my friends. It was really hard for me to dive into those without feeling extremely uncomfortable. At this stage in my life, I'm learning to stand somewhere in the middle and to let myself feel the hard and feel the emotions and acknowledge the heaviness of the world sometimes without letting it take me down so that I can still respond to a call to action in any area of life. The method that I've come up with that works for me and I want you to be able to take with you is something that I call the soft anchor method. The first part of this process is to really take the time to pause and breathe. I know there's a lot of talk about how regulating breath is and the importance of breath and deep breaths, but it's so true. The reason it's so talked about is because our breath is our life force. The physiological effects of breathing deeply and how it slows your heart rate. It activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest functioning. Deep breathing has also been associated with increased alpha wave activity in our brain, which is linked to improved focus and relaxation. There are so many benefits to just taking the time to pause and breathe deeply. It's the ultimate connector back to yourself and back to your home base, which is always you. I also really want to note that this is something that can really take time to cultivate as a habit, because I think as a culture, we're very socialized towards being incredibly reactive to our circumstances, reactive to our emotions, reactive to other people, really reactive to anything. It is a skill we have to cultivate and practice to become people who respond rather than react. And I talk a lot about nervous system regulation on my channel, but that is the first and key part of being able to respond to situations rather than reacting, because reactivity, that initial response, is usually not the healthiest response. It's usually not the response that our most grounded versions of ourselves would choose. So being able to pause, take a breath, take a step back, I'm not able to do that all the time. I don't think anybody's able to do that every single time. It is something that we continually have to recommit to and practice and forgive ourselves for being human and have that grace with ourselves, because it is a continuous practice. The next step in this process is to really name what you're feeling. Give it a name, give it a voice, give it room to exist, because the more we repress and push down our difficult feelings or our experiences, the stronger they're going to pop back up later. So we really have to give room, honestly, to fear in our lives and let ourselves feel fear and honestly welcome it and embrace it as part of the human experience. Really name what that feeling is, because if you can name it and you can acknowledge that it's there and it's part of being human, it has no power over you because it doesn't have to dictate your choices. So if you're able to name, I'm feeling stressed about this, I'm worried about this, that fear exists in me about this particular situation. If you're able to acknowledge that, it means so much in being able to move forward more clear-headed. Now, this next part is extremely important, and that is recentering in our sufficiency. If you just do the second part of this method, which is the naming the feeling and acknowledging the feeling, without being able to redirect back to your sufficiency and be able to really ground in, okay, all of my needs are met right now, or right now I can find peace or safety somewhere and I can ground in that peace and safety that exists without letting this fear take me down. I'm capable of that. It's regrounding and recentering in your sufficiency and your resilience and your capability to move forward in difficult circumstances. So that's kind of a two-part process. If you just name the fear, but you don't have any way to bring the fear back around and center it in your sufficiency and really anchor in that you will be okay because you have your own back, then it gets easy to spiral over the fear. So I also want to bring a caveat that of course there are crisis situations that happen in times where needs aren't met, and that's not exactly what I'm talking about in this video, where there are different things we need when we're actually actively in crisis. This is really working with that fear and anxiety. It's those situations where your body and brain's alarms are going off as if something life-threatening is happening when it's really not in the moment, and your needs actually are met in the moment, or you're safe in the moment. The next part of this is to respond rather than react, like we talked about before, and choose the softer response. Choose the more grounded response that you feel like the most grounded version of yourself would make. And like I've talked about in this video as well, this is a practice. It is a practice that we keep coming back to choose the response that our grounded selves, that our higher selves, our softest selves would make, that our wisest selves would make. One of my favorite things to repeat to myself when it's time to react to a situation or respond to a situation is, I want to respond from the wisdom and not the wound. That's one of my favorite sort of mantras that I like to repeat to myself, because it's so easy to react from our wounds. We have to learn how to respond from our wisdom and our innate wisdom. And this is also where grounding rituals come in, because if there is a circumstance in your life that is out of your control, or if there's something happening in a relationship that's out of your control, responding to that is going to be different than if it's something that you can change. So I have people in my life close to me that are in recovery, and I think the serenity prayer is a beautiful ode to this sentiment that give me the strength to change the things that I can, accept the things I can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference. That really is kind of the definition of living with an internal locus of control. But I do think a big part of acceptance is those grounding rituals, is those things in life that help you feel the most like yourself, that help you come back to yourself. Even something small, or something that might seem small to somebody else. For me, I love to bake. Baking is one of my grounding rituals. I love spending time getting ready in the morning. I love makeup and fashion and other things that make me feel more like myself or more grounded. I love writing and reading. There's all these things that I've had to kind of find those things in my life over time that help me feel grounded and help me feel more like I'm present and I have the capability to ground through these rituals when it feels impossible to. Now, the last part of this method may seem a little strange to some, but to me, it's been one of the most impactful aspects of this process, of this method for me. I had the first 4 steps kind of down for a while, and they worked really well with helping me regulate. They worked really well with helping me get through difficult things and kind of redirect back to how can I respond in this situation and what can I control. But adding this last little part onto this method has really helped it so that when the same issues come up in life, when the same stressors, when the things that I maybe have trauma around resurface, I'm a little bit more able to shift into a different mindset more quickly. I'll get to the point. The last part of this method is really to approach life a little bit more like a game. Approach it with a little bit more curiosity, as kind of an experiment. This is really open to interpretation. For me, when I do come across a stressor or something that's out of my control, it's helpful for me to switch into that mindset of, okay, let's see where this takes us. Let's see, I'm assigning a lot of meaning to this situation or this thing, or I'm placing stress on this situation, but maybe let's approach this with a little bit more curiosity. Let's approach this a little bit more like an experiment of how we can solve this problem, or an experiment of how we can approach life. To me, what that has really allowed me to do is come up with more creative solutions to things. And it's really opened my mind so that, because stress really narrows our field of vision. Stress really narrows what we're able to look at in a situation and how we're able to come up with solutions. Stress really shows up physiologically in our body. And if we're able to bring a little bit of curiosity, a little bit of that aspect of approaching it like a game or an experimentation, we really are more able to see creative solutions to things. So that aspect has actually been very important in adding on to this method. I really encourage you just to take that in and think on what that would mean for you, or what that would look like for you to practice that in your own life. This method is not about pretending everything is always fine and dandy. It's about creating an inner steadiness so that we don't collapse, because inner peace helps us show up better for ourselves, for others, and in the world in general. I'm still practicing this every single day. I always have to come back to this, and we're in this journey together. I would love to hear in the comments from you guys, where in life are you learning to respond instead of react? Or is there anything you would add to this method? Anything you would tweak for yourself? I'm really curious to hear your guys' thoughts and feelings on this topic. I love hearing from you guys. I'm so grateful and honored if you're still here, if you're spending your time with me. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. I'm really dedicated to building a beautiful space and community on the internet with anyone who wants to be here. So thank you again, and I hope you have a beautiful day.